Welcome back, everyone. Given the leaks, this is the story we've all been waiting for, the actual official announcements, and of course, all of those lines that we can read in between. So, Xbox games are going to be coming to other consoles, but after all of those leaks, it turns out that they are hedging their bets. They're going for smaller, older titles to test the waters over on PlayStation and Switch. So it's not what the biggest Xbox superfans were afraid of, right? Which was pretty much all the big games are going over, consoles are dead, oh no, it's all over. Instead, what we essentially had was Xbox leadership spending 20 minutes explaining why people shouldn't be worried, as well as basically hinting at everything that they've got planned for the future. But of course, there's always a little bit more to the story, and even just looking at the titles of the chapters of the video that they published, oh boy, yeah, they were very clearly trying to respond to something. Speaking of future as well, we are building ours at Bellular.games, and the reason here is pretty damn simple. We want to be able to make things free from the algorithm, and lately, the other side is the YouTube revenue has been brutal to the point where if it was just an AdSense, we'd actually be in a pretty damn precarious position. So that's why I'm trying to build new foundations over at Bellular.games so that I can keep this show going for you, and also continue to invest in the team, do better things, and actually make the show itself better for everyone in the long term. Now, over at Bellular.games, we publish Loading Screen, which is our daily newsletter that covers the comings and the goings of the industry, so that'll just land in your inbox. That's a lot of content. Also, you'll get all of our videos ad-free, you'll get them early, you'll also get our research reports that a lot of the videos are based on before I even see them. We've already launched our new game review format over there, and we've got an update post coming out over the weekend that basically lays out where we are now that the launch has happened and where we're going to be going. So that's what we're doing. I want to thank everybody for supporting us over there. You guys are literally saving our asses. And of course, in return for that, well, my mission is to do everything that I can to make this a better channel, more value to you. And that's basically, you know, the goal. Okay, so that's what's going on there. Let's talk a little bit then about Xbox. So first things first, then, the leaks. We got to address them. Now, a lot of these were, those were leaks that were corroborated and sourced independently from multiple different people and outlets. So, how can some of these leaks seem to be untrue? Well, the answer is, they're not really like that. All that leaks are a snapshot of reality presented from one individual to another. Not everybody's going to be up to date with the absolute latest information. So, it could be that at one point, they were considering Starfield, that they were considering Indiana Jones, or even some other plan. That's obviously going to be reflected in those leaks. Even people saying, hey, Microsoft are thinking about this. That is enough to rattle the superfans, right? And of course, information that people have is always going to be a dated thing, right? It'll be accurate as of the time of them getting the information, you'd hope, but it could be inaccurate, over time when plans change. So now we actually know what they are doing. That being said, I still think that those leaks are worthwhile and interesting, and I would not be surprised if the likes of Starfield end up moving over. But first, we just got to talk about what they talked about. So this comes from Phil Spencer, from Sarah Bond, and from Matt Booty. That's basically CEO of Microsoft Gaming, president of Xbox, and head of Xbox Game Studios. This is something they've been planning since December, but, you saw Phil Spencer's tweet, right? They very much had to move this up and address the leaks right now because they actually got to the point of truly shaking consumer confidence. And certainly when we think about the overall strategy, the long-term Xbox hardware proposition, yeah, that's kind of rough. We'll get to that, but okay. 4 games are coming to other consoles, right? Now, they say it's, quote, not a change to our kind of fundamental exclusive strategy. So that's them saying, nope, not Indiana Jones, not Starfield. They basically described the games, but they couldn't really name them because of individual game team contracts with partners. But basically, from all the different press sources, we've been able to corroborate that these games are Hi-Fi Rush, Sea of Thieves, Grounded, and Pentiment. They did, though, talk about the criteria, right? right, where these are games that are a bit older. They say a couple are community-driven, new games, kind of first iterations of a franchise that have reached their full potential, let's say, on Xbox and PC. So that's the idea of Sea of Thieves and Grounded, where how are you going to get more Grounded players? You're certainly not selling more Xboxes. I mean, they're selling a few. Game Pass is stagnating, and we actually have an update on that. So if you want more people in that live service, you got to bring it to PlayStation. And to be honest, for a big live service game like that, that absolutely makes sense. Imagine a game like, say, Helldivers. Now imagine it's an Xbox title. I know, kind of hilarious. Helldivers gets to be on the biggest console and well, obviously Steam. They feel absolutely no pressure to go over to Xbox because Xbox, being real, is pretty damn small. So if Helldivers was a Microsoft game, but wasn't on PlayStation, I mean, you can just see how much more poor the performance of that game actually would be. So, opening these things up to those other platforms basically helps those teams feel that they can continue to invest in those games. Certainly, if you're working in Sea of Thieves, this probably means more revenue, and that's probably good. Now, as for the other games, they say smaller games were never really built to be as kind of platform exclusives and all the fanfare that goes around that, which we think is Pentiment and Hi-Fi Rush. At the end of the day, Hi-Fi Rush could be on, I mean, absolutely anything, and I feel it actually would have a pretty solid home over on PlayStation as well. So, all of these games get a bigger audience. Happy days. As for the why, it's obvious. These games are not doing any form of major growth on their current platforms. PlayStation makes the most sense. As for doing this, well, the idea of the long-term health of Xbox is something. And as I watched this, I mean, if you were doing a drinking game where you took a shot every time that they said, more games to everyone, you would be, basically, you'd be in the emergency unit. That was just the clear point. They were hammering and hammering and hammering. And what they're basically saying is that, you know, reaching as many players is the thing that actually matters, and that other platforms will grow these franchises. So here's what Spencer said. Over the next 5 or 10 years, exclusive games that are exclusive to one piece of hardware, are going to be a smaller and smaller part of the industry. He says he believes this is a natural trend that they've been kind of going to over the last 10 years, and this is all an experiment to them. He says, and when we don't damage Xbox and we grow our business using what other platforms have to help us with that, we're going to do that. Essentially, there's money over there, why don't we collect it? It's not like we're sacrificing much platform growth. The most essential thing is when he says, and when we don't damage Xbox, right? That's like the core bit of logic there. So if Sony was to put Spider-Man in Xbox, that would damage Sony. They've got the incumbent. They are the people with the incentive to keep that wall up. If you're Xbox, you want to dig under their wall. You want to just go everywhere because, well, you don't have a big kingdom that you're taxing the shit out of behind a really big wall. That's what Sony has. So they're releasing these games. There's no promise of anything to follow. He said, I don't think we should, as an industry, ever rule out a game going to any other platform. We're focusing these initial ones on learning from the experience. Now, this has made some people feel a bit uneasy, right? There's this feeling that if the Xbox premium titles are multi-plat, but the PlayStation ones are exclusive, then that basically does just seed it just seeds consoles over to PlayStation, with Game Pass console being basically the only moat that Microsoft has left. So I'm going to go to some of Spencer's statements that he made to the press, right, because we've compiled all of that for you. Speaking to The Verge, he said that they've already sort of done this with Psychonauts 2, right? With Minecraft Dungeons, Minecraft Legends. That's certainly like a true enough thing. As for these games, he basically says that they're going to, see how these go and evaluate if it's worth the effort. Now, where it gets interesting is him talking about how he would like PlayStation and Nintendo games to be an Xbox, but he's not expecting, he's not really expecting it, right? So he praised the launch of Helldivers 2, but he was asking, how does that, a multiplayer live service game, well, how is that better because it's not on Xbox? And the answer there is fairly obvious. It would be pretty good if people on Xbox could play, but that would essentially be weakening Sony's big wall that they've got around their kingdom, and they're not going to do that because it makes no bloody sense. Now, that does rather interestingly go along with the PlayStation CEO basically saying earlier this week that PlayStation games would need to find new ways to increase their profit margins. So that's us thinking about, say, releasing in PC sooner. I just don't think that it would really make sense for them to start putting things on Xbox. Now, that does make sense. We've talked about the spiraling costs of games here, including those ones from Sony, like Spider-Man 2, but I think there's a lot of truth in how this industry is changing. Now, I still think exclusives have got to be a massive part of PlayStation's model. Absolutely. Ultimately, right? They, they basically have their sort of kingdom, their fiefdom, whatever, where, they've got people in it and they tax the shit out of them, and they definitely want to protect that from the barbarians. The thing is, though, as time goes on, we're moving away from hardware-based sort of fiefdoms, right? And we're moving to cloud fiefdoms, platform fiefdoms. That is basically the whole point, right? And what that essentially means is Fortnite. It's not about Fortnite getting a win by being in your console. It's about you getting a win by having Fortnite on your console, because Fortnite is bigger than you. And that's the thing. The power, the taxation will exist in the cloud. Now, here, when I say taxation, obviously, I'm not talking about sales tax. I'm talking about storefront fees, store tax. That's the business model, fundamentally, of pretty much all of these big companies. So basically, the point is, yeah, there's taxation on the console with its storefront, but the biggest picture is the platforms that are bigger than any one piece of hardware, and that is where a lot of these companies are going. Obviously, if you like games, maybe in the way that I assume you, or say me, the way that I like games, this is all pretty bad news. I don't want to be doing a Roblox, but it is what it is, and it's what these people have been talking about. Here's what Matt Booty said, and I think that really has changed the way we think about things. So in the midst of all that, I think at first party, we come back to the same core principles. First, all of our games will be on the Xbox platform. Second, all of our games will go into Game Pass on day one. And third, we know Game Pass will only be available on Xbox. So basically, this is the interesting wrinkle to it when we're talking about sort of all of these big platforms. What do a lot of these companies want? They want to be maybe to change the analogy, the sort of digital oil barons, right? That's why Microsoft is having Azure Cloud grow. It's why AWS has been an absolutely gargantuan part of Amazon, and so many of the things that you buy that maybe look like some sort of service, they're basically just reselling you, AWS, but with a good user experience. So the interesting bit to Microsoft here is basically they know Game Pass is important. They want that to grow. So for the niche of people who want a lot of value and to just sit down and play on their console, that's basically the moat around Xbox. Xbox is moated by Game Pass. They want to grow Game Pass. PlayStation is moated by exclusives and just raw market share. It's an absolutely fascinating differentiator between these two companies and the broader strategies that we're seeing in the industry. Now, let's go talk about some game stuff. So, right, Activision Blizzard games are coming to Game Pass. I think this is actually bloody big. So, Diablo 4 will be the first ABK game on Game Pass. It will launch March 28th. And they've also revealed that Game Pass now has 34 million members. Game Pass was at 25 million in January 2022. Now it's at 34 million. Now, this is interesting because that actually does represent a growth rate for Game Pass that has utterly cratered. Their growth rates were insane, and they basically overprojected what those growth rates would look like. Game Pass is absolutely stagnating. We have heard of this from multiple people with sources, even just from, my experience with the other hat that I wear, being in and around our game studio. I know that a lot of Game Pass stuff is, I know their strategies have somewhat changed. Let's just put it at that. So essentially, we have a slowing down, a sort of static Game Pass. What are you going to do? You're going to offer some value. And certainly Diablo 4 to me is like a perfect example of a Game Pass game, because if you are in Game Pass, all of these games are free to play, essentially, because what you've done is you've said, okay, I am just going to pay X amount a month for video games. There we go. That's how I'm going to get them. And for these sort of forever games where the entire business model of Diablo 4 is you just play it forever because it's an ARPG, well, that makes total complete sense. They've, I suppose, maximally reaped the financial rewards of Diablo 4's launch by obviously selling, $70, was it $80, $90 for the version of the early access to all of those millions of people. Now, what does this do? It just gets them a shitload of people who will be exposed to that store with all of its ludicrously priced lovely bundles. Thing is, though, that 34 million is not a good number. It really isn't, because, as pointed out by Piers here, who is an industry analyst, does Ampere analysis, that's actually in large part because of the rebrand from Xbox Live Gold to Game Pass Core, which is certainly not what I would call organic growth of the platform, and organic growth is the thing that will actually lead to good unit economics. You know, the way you've got all of those like big tech companies like the sort of disposable scooter people, or maybe like Deliveroo or Uber, where they were basically growing by operating at a loss, right? They were just, subsidizing customers so that they could just grow. But they all then have the problem of, right, what about profitability then? So in a case like this, you want that Game Pass number to grow because way more people are signing up to Game Pass, not because you've basically just tweaked the stratification of your products and renamed things, which, that's certainly a rough angle. But anyway, going forward, Game Pass will only be on Xbox platforms, meaning Xbox, PC, and mobile. All Xbox first-party games will be on Game Pass day one. And it's important to say that because there were heavy rumors that would change, right? That, say Avowed would actually be in PlayStation as well. Now, it hasn't been explicitly said, but this also presumably applies to Activision Blizzard King games, which is odd, actually. Because if you think about a game like World of Warcraft, well, you're making $15 a month. Well, I think it's $12.99 if people are on a larger plan, but you're doing that with a lot of customers. And just think about the core business of World of Warcraft. At a time, it was making, $15 a month from about 12 million people. That's, that's one game driving performance that's, at one point was like, say, half of Game Pass by one game. Kind of crazy. But if they put World of Warcraft in Game Pass, I mean, having a WoW subscription would be stupid. Unless, this is the weird thing, they sell 6-month bundles, and if you get the 6-month sub, like just a rolling 6-month sub, you get just sort of like mounts and stuff for free on top. Now, I would wonder, would they do that in Game Pass, but then keep the regular WoW sub that would have those sorts of perks? Kind of hard to tell. I just don't think that, like, business-wise, putting WoW in Game Pass would make any sense, although undoubtedly it is certainly a big lever they could pull if they really wanted to. But anyway, here's what they've said to The Verge. They've said that the numbers are good for them and they don't want the whole business to be Game Pass, right? In the end, I know there's people who don't believe it when I say this. Our goal is not to make everyone a Game Pass subscriber. I've said this many times that maybe 10 to 15% of our content and service revenue is subscriber revenue. It's a good business for us today. So that's basically the point. This was kind of backed up. You'll remember the story that got a lot of headlines about an Ubisoft guy working in subscriptions, him talking about some of the numbers there, saying like, hey, look, this is an important business, it's good, but it is, not absolutely ginormous, part of the industry. And that does seem to be continually backed up. Okay, let's talk about hardware then. One of the things that really did rattle the Xbox fans was, well, the notion that maybe if they're just all cloud, all Game Pass, and it's all changing, maybe they'll just abandon hardware. Well, here's what they said. And I'll just take it from the top so we got proper context, right? So this business update is all framed in terms of how Xbox Play Anywhere relates to both consoles and cloud gaming. As I said, if you had a shot for every time they alluded to Play Anywhere, you would essentially be dead. And it was only a 20-minute stream. Anyway, xCloud then, but also mega franchises like Minecraft and Call of Duty that reach absolutely everybody. They say it's not about one device, it's not about games in service of a device, rather the devices that people want to play on should be in service of making games as big and popular as they possibly could be. That already is just a little bit of a tweak on the business model. In the past, yes, the games were in service of the hardware in a way. That was kind of the point of exclusives, but it was the games in service of the hardware, in service then of you being on that platform, which then just gets them revenue over time. So this frames Xbox then as one of the biggest publishers in the industry, competing, of course, on the fronts of PlayStation and Switch because of Minecraft, and also them being humongous in mobile because of King, which technically is right. They just gobbled all of those things up, while meanwhile their own studios like 343 Industries kind of floundered. And if I say scale-bound, well, yes, a whole bunch of people will feel sad. Sorry for doing that to you. Ultimately, then, what comes next? What's up with hardware? What's going on? Well, Phil Spencer directly tied in the recent layoffs. He said, and what happens when an industry doesn't grow? You end up with some job eliminations, which we had. We had even our own hard decisions to make about being a sustainable business for ourselves, but in no way are we alone in that. So this is framing the industry as having two choices. Choice one, that really you have a fixed number of players. Well, you gotta monetize those players harder and harder and harder. And ultimately, think about this in any sort of product, any service that you use. You can see, say, aggressive affiliate deals that are really good value for the affiliate marketers. You see just all of that stuff when they're in that growth phase. But then, eventually, they need to consolidate. They need to make their unit economics better. That's what's going on here. So the industry basically has a problem. Games are getting more expensive to make, but they are not seeing massive customer growth. It could be that a lot of growth was kind of like pulled from the future whenever COVID happened and just got more people into gaming, but then, it's just been flat, right? Now, think about this from the core unit economics. I remember being able to go to the shop and get a bottle of Diet Coke for £1.20. Now it's like £1.85. The price of video games, though, yes, it's moved from $60 to $70. It's actually more expensive for us here in the UK, wahoo. But the point here is the price of video games has actually increased quite a bit slower than the cost of the video games. But of course, that's just sticker price. And that brings us to the other thing, which is if you're not growing your player count, you've got to monetize the ones you have deeper. And to make this hit home, here's a little bit of leaked stuff from Insomniac Games, right? They basically talk about needing to make a future AAA game for under $350 million. This is in a presentation called Sustainable Budgets. Here's the kicker though. Quote, in today's dollars, that's like making Spider-Man 2 for $215 million. That is a game that costs $300 million. So that's just giving you an example of what the cost of making games is actually looking like. So yeah, no shit, basically. Now, going into some of the console numbers, here's where it's interesting. This is from Christopher Dring, who is of GameIndustry.biz, who says PlayStation 2 and Xbox just under a 180 million install base, PS3 360 just over 170 million, PS4 Xbone around 180 million. PlayStation and Xbox market just hasn't grown in terms of audience. Revenue, absolutely, but there comes a point where you need new customers. That ultimately is absolutely going to be a spooky thing. I mean, yes, PC gaming's rising, which is awesome, but a lot of people are just using phones and tablets. Or they're actually finding that platforms like TikTok and just, social media hell, that those things are actually so psychologically engaging that video games are something they don't have the attention spans for. I know that, I'm not trying to be a generationalist or something, but I know people talk about Zoomers who basically struggle to play video games because they don't have the attention span. And while that does seem like, initially you might think, oh, that's bullshit. I've certainly seen it IRL, don't know about you. And that's really tough for this industry. Now, moving to the topic of hardware, this is what they say. We're at the highest level of users on console, highest level of users in PC, the highest level of users in cloud ever. We have double-digit growth on PC and cloud. So PC and cloud, pretty damn important. Consoles, they're not going away. And what they say does line up with some leaks, right? So they've said that Xbox hardware is something that will be coming. It represents, quote, the most flagship seminal experience of Xbox, and it represents a developer target. We invest to make sure when they do that, the games are going to run great in our hardware, but they're also going to be able to be accessed across any device or screen because all the other investments that we make. They also promised a hardware update this holiday. Now, this all lines up with the Project Brooklyn rumors. Basically, $500, redesign, comes with 2 terabytes of storage, better Wi-Fi, better Bluetooth, new gen of controllers that are at least trying to be more immersive, so maybe competing with PlayStation there, still costing $500. And even the leaked launch timeline actually has Brooklyn being there just at the end of October. What about next gen, though? Well, they say that they are focused on delivering the largest technical leap you will have ever seen in a hardware generation, which makes it better for players and creators. That's fairly interesting. There's also interviews elsewhere where Spencer was talking about the potential for handheld PCs, but basically starting from the viewpoint of Windows needing to catch up to the user experience that is offered by the Steam Deck, which in fairness is pretty damn good, and apparently that's something that they're working with the Windows team on. I think it's brilliant that this is a larger and larger market segment, and it's certainly been exciting to see those rumors about PlayStation even trying to get in that as well. Then, and speaking far more directly to people's concerns, Spencer says making sure that we respect, which is the word I use, respect the investments that people have made in Xbox going forward is fundamental. So he doesn't want Tim Dog to be gone and the other person to be worried, as that much joked about tweet that we laughed at a little while ago sort of suggested. So basically this is them saying, hello, we're confident, the plan's going, there's no crazy existential BS going on, but obviously they would say that, and as I said, the degree to which they basically said play anywhere, play anywhere, play anywhere, I mean, it was quite funny. But that said, pragmatic, and that's the only way they can win. They cannot dethrone Sony. And unless a massive mistake is made, that's going to be the same as we move into the next generation. Because where are people's game libraries? They're on Sony, right? So because of that, I mean, getting an Xbox, why the hell are you going to do that? It would take a bungle, a massive one, like, say, the Xbox One launch. It was the Xbox One's disastrous launch that obviously let Sony go in there with a brilliant console and absolutely thwack Microsoft, reversing their fate in the 360 PS3 generation. So ultimately then, what do we got? We got these 4 games being an experiment. What will change after that? To be honest, I think more games will come. I think they want to be a software company as well, not just a hardware company. And really just think about like the whole value situation here. If you're funding games that are that expensive, they're either Game Pass, and if it's Game Pass and console, well, that's already a console person you have. They probably know that they're just not seeing great results in the likes of Starfield for bringing people over to Game Pass or making them buy consoles. So because of that, yeah, I absolutely would not be surprised if Starfield comes to the PlayStation 5. So ultimately, that's basically that. Both of these companies are going off in their own directions. We've got Xbox pursuing growth by expanding how people can access the things that they are monetizing. And as for PlayStation, well, they just got to keep on trucking. I basically think PlayStation is strongest in the short term, quite strong in the middle term, and is weaker in the long term, and I think it's basically the inverse for Microsoft. I actually think that Microsoft have a long-term advantage here if they can stick with it, but that said, when you look at what each company has right now, it obviously makes sense to own a PlayStation 5 and to own a PC. And that's pretty much what we've all been saying since the Xbox One came out. Anyway, there we go. That's it for today's story. A hell of a lot of analysis to do. I think fascinating. I mean, look, man, I'm quite like a business junkie. I just love looking at these companies, different models, how they're trying to do things. So a big juicy story like this, I absolutely love. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Of course, head over to bellular.games. Over there, you can get all of our great stuff. And of course, you can hang out with our other members over on our Member Lounge Discord server. Okay, right. I'll see you over there. That's it for me today. Goodbye.